So now we're going to open it up to kind of an open forum and for questions and answers. And how we're going to do this is you can either send questions to the chat, or you can use the raise hand function in Zoom, and one of my colleagues will call on you, and we'll go from there. So thank you so much.
Right, so I see our first question from the chat from Mindy. So the design guidelines call for not having lots of asphalt. How will the Whale Soothe parking lot change? We can definitely take a stab at that. Jen, I think I didn't want to interrupt you. Would you like to take that first?
Sure. So Mindy, thank you for the question. So first I want to kind of preface that this is for zoning. This is for, we're not SimCity. We don't just say that goes there, this goes there. So we're putting in regulations that allow for development. The Whale Soothe parking lot, that is a publicly owned lot. That will remain a parking lot for the train station, for the users who will be utilizing the train. I just want to be clear. So that will still remain a parking lot for the foreseeable future. I just also want to acknowledge that we had Councillor Shane Burgo also joined the meeting. So I just want to acknowledge that his presence is here, and thank you, Councillor, for attending this evening.
So again, this is Grant King from SERPED. Wanted to just state one last time that we're certainly happy to answer any questions or take any comments you have today, but this is just the very beginning of a 3-week process where hopefully at your own pace, at your convenience, you spend some quality time with the design guidelines that are online, and you can kind of internalize all of its content, take some, be thoughtful about it, and then reach out either directly, as Philip and Jen described, to their email or through a comment card. So it's just the beginning of a 3-week process. But I do see a hand is raised now, so I can be quiet. Mr. Kendall, Jim Kendall, please. Oh, you're still muted, Jim. Can we unmute Jim Taylor?
Yeah, I'm forgetting my lessons here. Thank you for a great presentation. It was brief and concise, which is not usually the standard way of giving these programs. I attended some of the earlier meetings, live meetings, but I would like to suggest that if and when we clear up this COVID problem, that you continue with these hybrid meetings, where when you do have live meetings or live audiences, that you have some sort of web access as well. Not everyone can take the time or be able to make it in time for these meetings. And I find this a really great way to make sure additional people are able to be involved. So like I said, I thank you for that. And I do like the idea that you are presenting it as an open public meeting with the identifying of the other attendees and the videos, if so choose. So like I say, it's good presentation. I thank you for it.
Thank you, Jim. So we do have a question in the chat. So from Chris, he was wondering about the overlay district in the Class D common area. Do the guidelines allow for demolition of buildings and new structures? So demolition is kind of in probably part of a different part of just the standard New Bedford zoning. But yes, the idea is that some of these kind of older commercial industrial sites might be redeveloped, and a lot of the overlay district doesn't cover kind of specific, a lot of this existing houses. So like the ideal is for those to flip, but not necessarily like houses to be demolished.
I'll just add a little bit to that, Philip. So in New Bedford, we do have a demolition ordinance. So there is for anything that's over 75 years or older, and if they are seeking a demolition in whole or in part of a property, that would have to be reviewed by the city council and the historic commission for that demolition request. And it may be delayed via the city council vote for up to 2 years for a demolition request for a property. So that's part of that review, but there's a lot that goes into that. It doesn't mean that they're going to absolutely all the time say something can't be demoed, but it also, there's some teeth that this community has to retain historic properties, or as a help to retain those historic properties. But ultimately, the property could be demoed after the delay is up. So
I have a question. Oh. I have a question from Peter. Am I correct that right now under these standards, someone can build a business 60 feet tall and only 10 feet from a residential property line in the Church Street area? So the goal really there is, so kind of big picture, the answer is kind of yes, but not actually, because through the design standards and guidelines, that's what planners and the planning board is going to really be using to approve of any projects. And part of it is really about respecting the neighbors and making sure that there is kind of a step up. So we have kind of design guidelines and recommendations around step backs. So a step back is a little different than a setback. A step back is where a building would go up, say 3 stories, and then kind of move 10 feet or so, and then go back up. So the whole building itself might be 60 feet tall, but it will kind of be directly abutting that residential property. So Mindy has a question. Will there be trees or additional landscaping added around Whale's Tooth to break up the asphalt? So I think that is a specific question. Okay.
So Mindy, we are working with the MBTA right now in the design of the station and the platform, as well as the pedestrian bridge. So there's a lot of moving pieces that we are still working on, but absolutely landscaping is a part of that discussion right now. And we're absolutely looking to beautify that space and make it an inviting area for those users of the MBTA train. So thank you for that question.
All right, Ernesto, you can speak.
Hi, I was just wondering, with this going forward, with the zoning changes, or are these going to be as of right projects where they just come before or will there be public hearings as there is typically on these larger projects?
Okay, so I'll answer that as well. Thank you, Ernesto. So for some of the uses, they would be an as of right use. But some of the uses are also by special permit. We're still reviewing that. So if there are ones that you would be concerned about, certainly chime in and let us know if there's stuff that you would want a special permit. But I do want to be clear, as with all projects in the city, anything that's new construction and over a certain scale would still require site plan review before the planning board. So there would be a public hearing and public process for that.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have Sandra has a question. Will there be a connection from the developed areas, so Shaws and Savers, to the west of the North train station for pedestrians and cyclists to access the train station without following Kings Highway and Church Street? So basically a bike ped bridge over the rail.
Thank you, Sandra. At this time, we do not have a pedestrian bridge for that area. It will be accessible via the roadways and the sidewalks at this time.
I will say that it's not infeasible for such a large project kind of to the west of it as part of their creating this new connections to potentially propose that. There have been similar cases in other communities. Kind of off the top of my head, when in Boston Landing, which was a big project developed by New Balance, part of it, their community benefits package was to essentially build a new commuter rail platform there. So we're hoping that new development can potentially spur, but at the moment there is no plan to do that.
And also, I just want to clarify, 'cause I'm not sure if everybody is aware. So Sandra, just to clarify, the Church Street station is actually on Church Street side of the So it's on Church Street on that side of the rail line. It's no longer in the Kings Highway Plaza, as some people may have seen in the past. So the access, previously, I think there was some initially, many years ago, there was some drawings that had a pedestrian bridge from the neighborhood over the train tracks to the station that was originally shown as being in the Kings Highway Plaza there, Fieldstone Plaza. At this time, it is on the opposite side of the tracks, where the Julius Coach building used to be on Church Street. So no pedestrian bridge at this time.
Hi, Jennifer. I just wanted to, after looking at what's going on Church Street, I see a lot of, I see a lot of the rezoning going towards where the train's going to be. On the Purchase Street side, west of Purchase Street, a lot of the rezoning is going to be going in a residential neighborhood. So how is that going to affect, the neighborhood in itself, in that, I know there's a few buildings that need rehabbing and probably a few, yeah, if you want to go back. Next one, I think it is.
So this is the Church Street station.
No, I don't want to go to
He wants
Church.
to see the other one.
Yeah.
Oh, yep,
Sorry.
thank you.
So a lot of it's going into the actual neighborhood. You understand what I'm saying? Going down
I do, yep.
from Willis Street all the way to Mill. I want to know how that's going to affect, well, from what? Where we going, from Linden Street? Well, I'm talking about Linden Street in my ward now, all the way down to Mill Street. So there's a lot of, I know there's a lot of a lot of areas with, vacant car lots, and a couple of, there's a gym over there. I know there's a few shops over there, but I'm worried about more the residential area when it moves back, coming towards the Common Park area, not more between Linden and Pope Street, more after Pope Street, when you're going past Pearl and going into that area.
Yep, so Councilor, we've been looking at this area for a while, and first I want to clarify a couple of things. One, this is an overlay, so it would be the existing zoning in these areas would remain. So they would still be able to have the existing zoning. This is an overlay to encourage additional uses in the neighborhood. Again, in this area specifically, we are looking at these edges and these boundaries. So I'm more than happy to sit down and if you want to look at them in depthly, we have gone through very specifically and kind of drawn these boundaries. But the goal here, that from what we're trying to do, is really along that commercial spine of Purchase Street. And then it does expand a little bit around near the Armory, as that's in a development area as well. And then it comes back down around the Mill Street area. Again, we're really trying to focus more on that commercial edge there, allowing for development. And that doesn't mean it's specifically, it's mixed use is what we're looking at. So as I'm saying commercial, but it's a mixed use neighborhood. So we want to see residential, we want to see commercial, we want to see cafes, because this was a spine that has been in the past a historic commercial spine for our community. And as you indicated, there's stuff there, but there could be more. And that's kind of what we're trying to encourage in this district. And also that we know that some of the existing zoning isn't working for this district, as we have had comments on that over the years. And so this is kind of a way to address that. But absolutely, we don't want it to bleed too much into the residential neighborhood, because we do have a beautiful historic residential neighborhood over there. But we are looking at those boundaries. So we really would appreciate anybody commenting if there are any concerns about the specific lines that we have here.
All right, yeah, because I just kept on getting, we kept on saying the commercial use, the commercial use, the commercial use. It's a mixed use. And, that can go both ways. And I think a lot of people get confused when, you get mixed use, you can use it for whatever you want, and then you can turn it into whatever you want. So I want, we should be aware of, what you're going to do with the mixed use. If we're going to, especially if we're going to keep on using the words commercial use. And, that is a historic neighborhood. And even though I understand what's going on Purchase Street, on that corridor where you want to fix up, I think that needs fixing up. I think a lot of that stuff needs fixing up over there. I'm more worried about where it comes into the residential neighborhood and how it changes the people that live over there, and how it changes their view of things. So thank you. But thank you, Jennifer. We can talk about this at some other time, and thank you for the work that you're doing and clarifying a lot of things for people out here. And I appreciate you.
Great. Thank you, Councilor. I appreciate your participation.
So I see that, I see that Peter has hand raised. So Peter, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I just follow up with what Councilor Baptiste just talked about, but on Church Street, I mean, I know the west side of Church Street is mostly business, but the east side is a lot of residentials. And to have 100-foot, you know, maximum height of a building across the street from a residential zone, that's pretty insane in my view. I mean, 10-story building across, you know, looking at a 10-story building across the street, and I get your whole step up thing, but you know, if it's there, it's there. You know, it's the possibilities for them to do it. And I've been involved with enough planning boards and zoning boards that, you know, people tend to build to what they have the right to build to. And, you know, to have 100-foot, even 60-foot heights in that area is just crazy. You know, something in the 30 to 50 range, I think would be more in line with the building area. Maybe as you get towards the train tracks where the land slopes down, you could do like the 60 or 70 where the old Chamberlain Mills is and stuff like that, because you know it is kind of downhill a little bit. And then even the Shaw's area, you know, that's more of a complete you know, business zone. But you know, Church Street is still half residential, half business, you know, and so having those heights is just crazy in my mind.
So Peter, I want to thank you for your comments, and we did struggle with this. I want to recognize that because personally, I will let you know that I have lived on Church Street for the past 10 years. I lived in this neighborhood on Clifford Street for the past 10, and I've just recently moved a little bit more north, down Church Street, just past Arkin Hill. But we did struggle with this because the unique thing here to recognize is that those areas, those mills are currently zoned industrial, and in that industrial zoning that currently exists, is 100 feet. So they can build to 100 feet now. And so we struggle with this in the zoning overlay because it's already allowed in our district there. I mean, we can talk about, absolutely, if there's enough pushback, we can talk about maybe lowering that down. But I do want to recognize that it's already allowed in that district, and that's kind of why we set it there. But we did put that caveat of if you're adjacent within the certain foot of the residential, that we really want that step down concept in 60 feet. So you really need to have that look when that project comes in, and what is the heights within, you know, that view shed, and how does that impact the neighborhood? Because we are really concerned about that as well. So that's the kind of the explanation of how we got to where we are.
Yeah, we
But
definitely.
we absolutely are more than happy to hear anyone's comments and concerns and, you know, suggestions on that.
I'll echo Jen's point about it was very tricky to try to figure out how we can finesse it where we do kind of have a true step up, because the mill buildings are actually quite tall. I don't think they're quite 100 feet, but so the idea is that they do kind of exist already, that condition with these existing residential areas. So we'd love to hear your feedback kind of offline, whether you email us or we can have a call to discuss it, whether or not you think the design guidelines and standards, how they're written right now, would actually kind of be enforceable. Because you're right, the developers are going to build to whatever they see that's that number, but the idea was the design standards and guidelines could kind of provide some leeway and flexibility where we can achieve what we want to do, which is like a balanced approach to the existing neighborhood.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I know the mills are there already, and I get that, but it's, you know, everything east of those mills are not built up that high right now. So like I said, keeping the mills area right now where it's 100, that's, you know, that, like you said, it's probably close to that, but stepping it down quicker, like, so when you get right on Church Street, maybe that's the 60 zone too versus, you know, 100 feet,
Right.
you know, and like I said, even 60 in my mind is a little high, but
Okay.
if it's already currently zoned for that in that area, then it is. But I thought I read somewhere that it was zoned, you know, a smaller height in that area.
Yeah, and I do want to clarify that this does look really thin, but this is actually about the width of a typical city block. So it's actually quite large between kind of the buffer, but I hear you that 60 feet does also seem pretty jarring. Okay, so let's see.
I think Jeff was next, and then Jim
Okay.
had a question.
Jeff Pontifier, can you hear me?
Yes.
I commend you on this website. It seems very comprehensive, but I think we all realize there's multiple initiatives going on here. So this is pretty much dedicated to the TOD aspect of it. But then we have the MBTA doing their initiatives along with the DOT. And as I understand it, basically the MBTA is the train. But we have what the DOT is looking to do on Route 18 at all those intersections. And to follow this in a comprehensive way, it would certainly be nice to figure out some way to put all of that presentation together in one place so that we don't have to be worrying about, well, okay, we're paying attention to this TOD, but there's actually an intersection going to take place, you know, at Wells Street or something like that. Any thoughts on that? As far as trying to get something that would combine those efforts, at least in some way that we could follow and see how they're interacting.
Jeff, thank you for that. We'll have to think about how we can best create a resource where you can get to all of our varying materials. Because I understand your comment here, because obviously, as you've been attending all of these meetings, we had a South Coast Rail had a presentation, I think last month, and as well did the not the MBTA, MassDOT, about the Route 18 project. And I recognize that they seem disjointed, but they're all related to the same corridors. So I'll have to think about that a bit and how we can make sure that all this information is all in the same place.
Jen, I can also, I think
the city or Serped, perhaps we can.
Yeah, so we can certainly post links to the MBTA side of things from our project webpage. And I know that MBTA has Jean Fox here tonight, so she could chime in if that's possible. I don't see any reason why we couldn't directly link from this project webpage to theirs. And then we do have a representative from our transportation planning department here. We're trying to understand exactly what specific traffic changes you were referring to on Route 18. But Jeff, if you'd be willing, why don't you reach out to the project team offline? We'll see if we can understand exactly what you're looking for. And I don't see any reason why we couldn't also add that to the project webpage from the NBTOD side of things, the New Bedford TOD project. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'll do that.
And then I think, Jim, you had your hand up once more.
Yeah, I did. Thank you for taking me a second time here. And thank you, Jeff, for your presentation. My thoughts were along a similar line, and I was going to ask about the safety procedures, gates, and barriers along the busy intersections. How will they be, adopted to work with those problems in and of and by itself? The second part to my question is also related to something that Jeff mentioned, is that the noise abatement for the people who are living on the west side of Purchase Street. We had quite a conversation on the Route 18 about noise abatement, always to the point of taking down the upper level of the hills that are approaching Cogswell Street. So there was a lot of discussion there, but I haven't seen or heard anything along these lines right here. And thank you.
Sure. So again, I just want to recognize that we recognize that these are different conversations on different project teams. So, Jim, you brought up some good points. So some of those questions are from transportation related items. So you're talking about crossings at Tarkin Hill Road, crossings along the waterfront areas. I think it's kind of, Tarkin Hill Road and Nash Road. Those areas, I think you're talking about the crossings. And then in terms of the Route 18 project, that's still in a design phase. So that was the initial design hearing that was many people attended. And that's where that question of the elevation change on Route 18, as if it becomes another boulevard on the northern portion connecting from around Elm Street to Cogswell Street. And so that was a question that was brought up at that meeting. That project is still ongoing in terms of design. I don't think there's any new designs yet that I have seen, or the public is going to be presented to the public yet for that. But that was definitely heard at that meeting. I want to recognize that noise question was raised, and we did again relay that to that Mass DOT team for that project. And then there was one more item you had. And again, this evening we're focusing on the city's rules and regulations for zoning, and that's for the development private land in the city. And that's what we're focusing on this evening. So I know there's the infrastructure pieces, and this is the zoning and regulation pieces. So it's related but different.
Right, and I was part of that discussion about noise abatement, if and when they ever get going on Route 18. But I haven't seen or heard much of it for the rail system. You not only have the houses just on the west side of Purchase Street, you've got quite a development up north of Tarkin Hill Road that some consideration may have to be given. I'm not sure what speeds are expected from the trains, but I would assume that it's going to be quite a bit noisier than what you might expect on Route 18. So I'm just asking, has that really been, put to the test with some heavy consideration?
I see if Jean has a question. Go ahead, Jean. Thank you.
Thank you. Two things, Jim. On the crossings that you mentioned, there'll be fully modern automated crossings. Safety's been the priority. DPU's been out with us to do assessments of all crossings. So it'll be gated and alarmed. And the trains will sound their horns as they go through them. So there will be that noise. We have done an extensive noise analysis throughout the entire corridor, and areas that have been determined severely impacted. Will there be some sort of mitigation proposed? But I'll tell you, in the city, the analysis that we do follows FTA guidelines, and they take into consideration everything: topography, distance from the tracks, ambient noise, where you already have freight traffic existing. That's part of the equation as well. So we're finding that in the city perspective, there's so much already noise that I don't know about the entire eligibility. That policy is still in development, and we'll share it with the city as soon as it's finalized. The trains themselves won't be going fast in and out of the stations. They'll also be riding on what we call continuously welded rail. What you have out there right now is jointed rail. So your freight traffic running along at 10 miles an hour, sometimes 5, you hear a clickety clack. You won't hear that. And the fact is, once they exit a station, they'll be moving along faster. They're not going to be around long enough to really be much of a nuisance. And I'm not saying that additional vehicular traffic on 18 isn't an issue. What we have to do is just watch and monitor the situation of everything coming together. Going back to that previous point, that everybody, it'd be really nice to have all of these projects come together so that everybody has a single point of reference. And that's what I would love to see us do. I hope that was helpful.
It was. And I think the previous comments about having a wider view or more opaque, more visible view of all these coming together, as you mentioned, Jean. There's still no mention how they're going to handle the filling in of the waterfront north of the bridge. So all these things are coming together at a time where I'm kind of glad I don't live back up on Tarkin Hill Road or just off of Tarkin Hill Road like I used to, because between the traffic and everything that's been going on. But like you say, it's progress, I guess. And
Yeah.
I hope it all comes together well. Thank
Jim,
you.
it all hit us at once. We were treading water for 30 years. So now we're
Yeah.
doing really great work with the help of Serpent and city planners and everybody else that's working so hard on it. You're going to find Kings Highway is going to be much improved once PA Landers gets out of there, with dedicated turn lanes, better signaling. So even that area is going to make a much more attractive area for economic development, which complements everything that this group has been talking about.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jennifer, I think there's a question for you in the chat regarding the timeline to finalize all of this, the zoning and the design guidelines and so forth with the city.
Okay, I do see that. So Alana, I see your question there. I'm talking about the current finalization of the regulations. So as of right now, we have this 3-week comment period for the material that we presented tonight, the concepts and the design guidelines. The zoning, once that, we still have to have our legal review, and we are still finalizing, small details of the zoning based on this conversation this evening. The zoning will then go through its final legal review with the city. And once that's complete, we will be going through the typical public process for the zoning, which would be going before the planning board and the city council for review through the process. So it'll be filed with City Council. We'll make it available on our website for review. And if necessary, we'll have another public meeting. I mean, we will have the public meeting with the planning board and the City Council ordinance committee, and then the final City Council meeting. So that's kind of the typical process that we would go through for the zoning changes. But again, we'll make it publicly available. We want to see what people comment here, and that will guide how we move forward for that. So we don't have an exact timeline, because again, we want to hear what everyone has to say tonight, and that will kind of guide us for how we move forward. And then I do see there's a question in the chat from Camille. So Camille, thank you, one of our planning board members. And I see some of our zoning board members are on this evening as well. So I just want to say thank you to all our boards and commission members who serve our city tirelessly, reviewing projects and ultimately having to be the referees of our zoning regulations. So thank you. So Camille has a question about what is the height for development at the Purchase Street area? Will it be like Church Street? Yes, I think Philip just pulled up that map. So yes, again, Camille, because we recognize that this is a residential area, we are proposing a lower height in the residential area, as Philip's showing, for 60 feet. And then that 100 feet would be more along the area adjacent to the train station. So on the other side of Route 18 there, shown in the orange.
Yeah, and I do want to clarify about the 60 feet, because we've definitely heard that, yes, it is a pretty big jump from 2 to 3 story houses to 60 feet. And certainly 100 feet. So I do want to just showcase, one particular page from the actual document. So as you can see, as I mentioned before, there are standards. Does everyone still see my screen? Just get a confirmation. Okay.
Yes, we can see you.
Yes.
You can see
Okay,
it.
great. So there are standards. Which is really just like, okay, here are the maximum height zones that we really want to see. But we do acknowledge that 60 feet is still pretty high. So here it says, if a building is adjacent to or across the street from an established residential, so RA, RB, RC are residential zoning districts, the upper floors should step back at the roof line or 1 story above the roof line of the neighboring buildings. And that was kind of what I was talking about, those step backs, to make sure that it is kind of gradual. And then similarly, there are other ways to reduce the perception of height. You know, something that's really tall, that's further away, does seem shorter to the eye. So setting taller elements back and using other lower height buildings, vegetations, and trees to screen those taller elements is another way to kind of reduce the perception of height. Obviously, we want to hear more of your comments as we go through the comment period of whether you think this works, whether it needs to be stronger language to clarify it, or even just kind of adjusting a little bit of what we currently have. Love to hear all of that feedback.
Do we have any other questions or comments for this evening? Yeah, Maria.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the presentation. I do have a few questions. When you talk about open spaces, what exactly do you mean? I know that we've talked about this in the past, and I just want to make sure that we're not going to be creating a space where the potential, crime can happen. I want people to be able to be safe in their neighborhoods. So what exactly do you mean by open spaces in these areas?
Sure, that's a fantastic question.
Excellent, yeah.
So in terms of open and public spaces, definitely want to create, eyes on the street, make them engaging. We don't want kind of places that do encourage kind of unsavory activities. So we have kind of a lot of recommendations of how to create those public spaces that are really engaging. How do we use lighting properly to make sure they're engaging, and also make sure we're using greenery to also soften this space up, public art. And all these details will really come down to what a particular project is proposing and how the people who are reviewing it can say, hey, I think this might create a problem. How can we edit this and kind of tweak it where it won't create that problem? So in terms of public spaces, it's like plazas, but also just smaller little area pocket parks. And
Arch, I want to kind of clarify a little bit, Philip. So, Counselor, I want to be clear. We're not talking about, in instances where, we have in the city areas where vacant buildings were turned into pocket parks. We're talking about areas for private development. So if a private developer comes in and, on the first floor, they have retail and they want to have a plaza where they have outdoor seating, that's the type of thing that we're trying to encourage here. Or if it's a residential space that they're a residential property, they want to have some outdoor space for their residents. That's the type of thing that we're looking for, or a kind of a courtyard area, or a area along the frontage that has a communal space that the people who are going to the cafe or the residents who live in the building can kind of integrate and be together. Or if it's a large commercial development, there's like a public space in the middle where there'll be retail here, retail there, residential here, and there might be some kind of communal space in the middle for activities or kind of outdoor event space. That's the type of thing that we're looking to do here, but we're not trying to create little pockets here and there.
Right. As I've stated before, this is a very quiet neighborhood. And, as Mr. Chase pointed out, a lot of the neighbors around there, and they should expect, we all expect a little bit of change of life, but a quality of life. I just want to make sure that it doesn't completely change what many people in that area have been living with for the last 40 or 50 years. They understand there's going to be some changes. It's bad enough that we're going to be dealing with a lot of traffic in that area. But they understand that change is good, but can also be not so good. So I just want to make sure that we're not creating pocket parks, Jennifer, because as you know, we've had problems with them in the past, and the city, can't keep up with the ones that we have. I mean, they've been doing a very good job recently, and I know that this is going to be private commercial areas. I just want to make sure that those commercial owners understand the responsibility that they have to the neighborhood. So I just want to be very clear on that. And, secondly, I think the most important thing, it's great that we have everyone on these meetings, these Zoom meetings, but I really want the opportunity to have more public meetings in person. Jean Fox and her staff did a great job in doing that at Normandan Middle School. So as we go on with this, I would like everyone to schedule a couple of in-person public meetings if that's doable. I think it's very important to get the input from the neighborhood and the people that live there, and they should have a voice in their quality of life and what's going to happen across the street. So I think it's a great project. I support it. But again, I want to make sure that the neighborhood is involved 100%. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Councilor. Really, really quickly before we lose you, I just wanted to make sure you saw that Philip switched between the presentation and the actual design guidelines document. So with your background and your knowledge of the neighborhood and what you really want to see, I would love it if you have, I acknowledge you must be very busy, but if you have a moment to look specifically at the open space section and give us your feedback. We want to make sure that we're not accidentally encouraging something that you don't want. So
it's not that I don't want, it's what the neighborhood.
Sure, for sure.
And I'm
loud and clear.
Someone that's very respectful of what the neighborhood wants. And I know that you guys are too. I'm not saying that you're not, but I think that's why I think it's very important to have, the more meetings we have, the better. And the more, not everybody has the ability to do a Zoom meeting, right?
Sure.
A lot of the people that live in those neighborhoods are in their 70s, their 80s.
Sure.
Even some of us in our 60s don't know how to use a computer. So I know that COVID has, delayed a lot of these meetings, but I think if we can have 1 or 2 meetings in person so that people in the neighborhood can give their opinion about these open spaces and other things that's going to happen, I think it's very important.
Loud
So
and clear.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank
And I just want to also recognize the councillors here this evening have been very helpful with our outreach to the communities. And we'd love to continue this conversation with all of you and have those meetings in your neighborhoods. So please
Thank
feel
you,
free to reach out
Jennifer.
to me and my staff, and we
Thank
can
you.
coordinate that.
I appreciate everything you guys have done. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. So we have a number of people wanting to submit questions or comments. So the order we're going to do is Ernesto and then Gail. So Ernesto, you can go.
Hi, so my name is Ernesto Bello. I've lived in the city since I was 11 years old. I come from a fishing community, right? This is a fishing community. And the part of the beauty of the city is the hillside on Purchase Street gradually goes uphill. So being in construction, I can understand 60 feet. But immediately adjacent to the area where that restriction ends, if you put buildings up to those, even if you talk about drop back, you're still creating shade, right? So in the morning, these people are not going to have see the sunrise until 9 o'clock in the morning. I mean, there's going to be, I mean, you're talking about the sun rises from the east and sets to the west, right? So they'll have beautiful sunsets, but they will never see a sunrise again. And a lot of people that have bought homes in that area, in that community, are going to lose that view because of these new proposed projects in the neighborhoods, right? I mean, that's a serious issue here that should be considered. 60 feet, you're talking, so working in Boston, working in construction, being a carpenter, 60 feet, you're basically talking about five stories over podium is what you guys are looking to put. These dense, 200, 300 unit projects. I'm very familiar with them. There's a lot of transit orientated communities in Boston and of Boston. And I've seen it down Route 3 and, over into west of metropolitan Boston. So I'm very familiar with it. That a lot of these people, and I think it's going to be crucial, especially in the North End. And I've door knocked in those neighborhoods during campaigns, and it's mostly elderly people, people that are used to a very quiet neighborhood. When you're talking about millennials moving into these buildings, they're going to commute to Boston, and they're going to want a mixed use as you're proposing, which will involve restaurants and bars. And currently that area is industrialized. So those people settled in those areas, lived in those areas for several years, and their whole way of life is going to change overnight once this starts happening. I've watched it happen in and around Boston, and I don't think the city has really realized what's the transformation that's about to occur.
Ernesto, thank you for that. We're going to have to review those heights. We appreciate that comment. And I just want to recognize that the neighborhood that you're talking about is my family's lived there for 3 generations. My grandfather's home is where I lived for the past decade, in a multi-generational home in that area. So I recognize that neighborhood. We are very cognizant of that, and it is our homes as well. And again, I just live a little bit further north now on off of Darken Hill Road, but
well, it won't affect you.
But it is my family still owns a home, 2 homes actually on Clifford and Princeton in this area. So it hits home to us. We all are part of this community, and so we will review these heights as it's been a question brought up this evening. So we do appreciate everybody's comments, and if there's further comments or guidance you want to provide to us, please feel free to send it to us, and we'll take into consideration.
Thank you.
And Gail, I believe you were next.
Oh, thank you, guys. So I'm going to be brief, but I just want to introduce myself and what we've been doing. I work for the YMCA, and we work on Healthy Neighborhood Plan. That's a conservation law foundation where we've been preparing the residents in the area in the neighborhood that we are in. Part of this Kolaski Park, south of Kolaski Park, is part of our neighborhood. And so we would make ourselves available to, Maria was talking about meetings with the neighbors, and we would, my resident researchers live in the community. So we've been preparing the residents to try to take ownership of change, to have some say the change in their neighborhood. So we're going to make ourselves available. And I just want to mention interesting what's happening. As Ernesto said, we have 9 communities, and part of those 9 communities in the Boston area and Dorchester specifically, and they had a building that was going to be mixed income, and they thought that was great. And then they said, okay, it's going to be multi-use, and then they had a convenience store. And so our team has been experienced through the residents there, so we can be an asset. And so they said, well, you know, it's great. We have a convenience store, but the gallon of milk is $7. We can't afford it. So there's a lot of layering that we'd be able to help. Ernesto, you're right. Things will be changing, but we're armed with information that we can assist. And just the Conservation Law Foundation, they work with developers, Jen, and then they kind of incorporate the multi-use. They invest in projects in Boston, and it's an interesting, they call it the equity fund. So I can provide all that with you guys at another time, and our team can be available with the planning team if that's something you guys want to do.
Oh, wonderful. I would love if you could share our information with your partners and the groups that you're working with, and send us any feedback or observations that they've had. We'd love to get that in this 3-week comment period, particularly as we are looking at it now. But you know, if there's anything as we move forward, we'd absolutely love to partner with anybody who's outreaching in the communities and making sure the message is getting out. So thank you, Gail.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Antonio, I think I see a question in the chat, and I think I understand it to be pertaining to the actual fares for the ride. Is that correct? Fares into the city on the South Coast Rail project?
Yeah, if it's not competitive, nobody take the train. Nobody.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
So yeah,
Grant. No, I got it. We don't have established fares yet. Those are subject to change. So when and until we have revenue service, I can't tell you what the cost will be or what package deals there will have. But I will point out that I live in a Sonnet, and if I go into Boston peak period, it's a 2.5-hour drive, and that's in a pretty uneventful day. We have had worse days. I had a meeting yesterday where people were coming down from the Boston area to Berkeley, so the reverse commute, and there were accidents, and it was raining, and they were all late. So the problem with the roadways is the lack of reliability. Buses get into the same traffic that the cars get into. There's only a 9-mile zipper lane in Boston, and that can have problems too. If you've ever been stuck in that, it's very frustrating. The other thing too with taking the train is you're not parking the car, and if you're fortunate enough to find a spot in Boston, you're going to leave your left arm at the gate. It's so expensive now to park in Boston, and real estate is at a premium. So those rates just continue to escalate. While I can't address your fare, I can tell you that this will probably be a far more reliable ride for you, and it will avoid wear and tear on a personal vehicle. The same traffic that you will experience on a bus, which also isn't always reliable. I know that DATCO does its best, but sometimes if they have a broken down bus, they can't replace it for a couple of hours. And then the parking, and finally, I can't stress enough, the more people we can get off the roadways and onto trains and other forms of transportation, the better our air quality will be. I don't know if you're aware, but Bristol County is among the worst places for air quality in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
That's fine.
I hope that was helpful.
No, not really. If you build a project and you don't know if it, at the end is competitive or no, it's not a project for me.
We absolutely did ridership analyses. We did all of that. We did what are the economic development potentials by creating this link. We already know, for example, or we're seeing anecdotal evidence that there's a great deal of interest in taking advantage of some of the nicer housing stock in the cities of Fall River and New Bedford by people who want to get out of the Boston area. We absolutely did a cost benefit analysis, or we wouldn't put $1 billion into it.
No, but you tell me that at this point you cannot give me, say, will be competitive or no. You didn't answer my question. You didn't answer.
So I can't tell you what the fare will be right now.
No, I don't want to be the fair. See,
Okay.
The question is, will be competitive or not competitive with the bus?
Highly competitive with the bus and more reliable than the bus.
More reliable, I know, just because there's a independent line for the railway. There's no lights. There's no nothing. Yeah, for you that's okay. But
yeah, no, it just depends on what you need to get into the city for. I mean, the bus is perfect for some people if they don't have to get in the morning rush. And the train has the quiet cars where you can do work and not talk on phones and things. So there are different things. It depends on what you're looking for. But our analysis showed that this would be highly competitive and highly desirable, or we wouldn't be doing it.
At this moment, even with the price of the gas is cheaper. Even with the price of the gas is cheaper. Drive than take the bus at this time.
Oh, well, I don't know what the fares are right now.
But I know. I know.
You
so
do. Okay.
If it's not if it's not competitive, nobody take the train. Nobody.
Well, I think we'll have to see how that comes out. We'll have to see what the MBTA does with the fares. But the goal is to really provide a good, reliable service that is cost effective.
I hope.
Yeah, I do too. Thank you.
I hope just because it's just okay. That's fine.
Thank you. That was a
Thank
great
you.
question. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I think Peter, you've had your hand raised for quite a while, so definitely feel free to ask your question or provide a comment.
I just wanted to know if, I mean, it's kind of not on this subject, but it still is a little bit. Is there any talk of redesigning Church Street in the near future to accommodate all this extra traffic that's going on? I mean, I know King's Highway is being done now, and I hear that that's gonna do a bunch of stuff, but I still think people like going north from Nash Road are gonna go straight to the highway, right up the road. And I mean, Church Street now, north of Tackland Hill Road, gets backed up almost to the light from that new Alma Del Mar on a daily basis. So just want to know if there's any kind of talks on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. So that is on our radar, and there are ongoing conversations, but we don't have a plan finalized that's available at this time. But there are conversations about what we do there and what that may look like in the future.
Do we have any more questions or comments? I think we were aiming to, I forgot if I put 7:30 or 8, but I think we did put on the flyer as ending at 7:30 just to respect everyone's time. But we are really appreciating all the comments and questions we've heard today so far. All right. Thank you again for coming and listening to our quick presentation, and also for the really engaging conversation discussion. We've definitely heard you loud and clear about certain things, and we'd love for you to take a deeper dive into the design guidelines and standards and also the zoning overview document, and give us your comments either through the comment form on our website or just by emailing Jen and me. We are also very open to having just phone conversations with anyone to discuss anything in detail or clarify anything. But because only really through your feedback does this plan get better and better. So thank you all, and hope you all have a fantastic evening. All the materials will be posted on the website, including this recording, and all the documents are also there, and this presentation will also be posted. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And just last item I want to say, as Jeff Pontiff mentioned or asked about, we can absolutely put somewhere the links to this project page, the Southwest Rail project page, as well as the other project page for the roadwork project by MassDOT. So we'll look at where we're going to put that, but we'll make that all available for those who aren't aware. There are project pages for all of these elements, and there's also wonderful newsletters from South Coast Rail, the SERPED team, and SERPED in general, that you can chime into and get a lot of information about what's happening in our region, and particularly what's happening in New Bedford about all these projects. So thank you, everyone, for this evening, and we're looking forward to continuing this conversation, and have a great evening.